The entire college football world is focused in on the college football playoff, and rightfully so. It's the most important thing going on in the sport right now. But it's not the only thing going on in the sport right now. There are games this week in the Big Ten that could see teams extend their season and get those ever-important bowl games and bowl practices. And there are other teams that could be on the short end of the stick this week and end up being home for the holidays. It's time for my Week 12 Super Preview and Picks as we go around this big nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
There are a handful of teams with first-year head coaches that are on the brink of a bowl game right now, and if they can get to that 6-win level, that can certainly propel them to the next level as we get into year 2 and 2025. As we start to look ahead, folks, it's gonna happen here in about 2 or 3 weeks where we've got our eye on that year coming up as we approach the end of the season. Okay, when we dive into these picks, we gotta start on Fox College Football Friday night when the UCLA Bruins go up north to the Pacific Northwest to the greatest setting in college football. We've got a World of Warcraft field for some reason up there in Seattle, and it is going to be a blackout, likely a raucous atmosphere up there on campus in Seattle. I have 2 big questions when I look at this game between the Bruins and the Huskies. Here's question number 1. Can Washington move the ball through the air against the Bruins? Or maybe the question should be, how much success can Washington have through the air against this UCLA defense that isn't great through the air? They're much better against the run right now. The Huskies are 6th in the Big Ten in passing. We've seen some solid to some good to some really good passing performances from Will Rogers at quarterback. We know that tandem, Giles Jackson and Denzel Boston. I feel like we're going to need to see some explosive plays, specifically from Denzel Boston this week, for Washington to be able to get the win. And I think that they can get over the top. I think they can create some explosive plays against this UCLA passing defense. And then another question I have, can the Bruins run the ball effectively for the second consecutive week? Coming into the season, I was talking to some UCLA folks that, hey, TJ Harden could be a 1,000-yard back. It hasn't really panned out that way, has it, in Westwood? But TJ Harden is coming off his best rushing performance of the season in that big Friday night game against Iowa. He had 20 carries for 125 yards. And preseason, and then as the season has gone along, I think the weakness maybe of the Washington Huskies is on the in the trenches. You look at that defensive line and this rushing defense as a whole for Washington. They are giving up the 3rd most rushing yards in the Big Ten right now. So which one of those is going to be better? Can UCLA run the football better than Washington can throw the football? UCLA is scoring 27 points per game during this 3-game win streak. I think the UCLA defense, specifically the UCLA defensive line, can win the battle up front against the Washington offensive line. I think the Huskies are going to hit explosive plays in this one, but I've got a big-time win for Deshaun Foster. I think he keeps it rolling. I've got UCLA 23 and Washington 21. That is obviously a UCLA cover with Washington as a 4-point favorite, and I've got this one going under by 2 points. I really like the way the UCLA Bruins are playing right now. Let's head over to the friendly confines of Wrigley Field. Yet another noon game for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Gee, that hasn't been talked about at all this week. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit here next week. Now, I think there's maybe two reasons why Ohio State might not put up 50 points in this game. First of all, it's being played at a baseball field. If you watch that game at Wrigley Field last year where Iowa played Northwestern, you had about a foot and a half deep hole down there at the goal line. Baseball fields just aren't meant to be played with 320-pound linemen digging their feet and putting all of their leverage into the football field. It's not used to that. We'll see if the ground screw has this field a little bit more ready to play in this game between Northwestern and Ohio State at Wrigley Field. So you got an early game, a little bit of a sleepy atmosphere maybe at Wrigley Field. You got a slow track, not exactly a fast track. At this baseball field. And I think Ohio State is going to lean on Northwestern in this game. You look at kind of some of these performances as of late. Like you look at that game against Purdue, you saw Will Howard maybe put up bigger numbers in this run game as well. I think they're going to lean on it. They're going to look to Quinshon Judkins. They're going to look to Trevion Henderson to run right at Northwestern. And then they're going to create those plays, of course, with their passing targets, the Jeremiah Smiths and the Emeka Ibukas, certainly of the world. I think Ohio State wins 38-6 at Wrigley Field. That's an Ohio State cover by 4 points, and this one goes over the 43.5 by maybe the slimmest of margins, just a half a point in this one. Look, if you are looking for a really competitive game and a close game, a potential for that type of game, turn on Michigan State and Illinois, 2:30 Eastern on FS1. The Illini, 2.5-point favorites against the Michigan State Spartans. It's the thinnest spread of this week in the Big Ten Conference. Both teams are sliding, losing. Both teams have lost their last two games. Now, the winner of this game is going to get off the schneid. If Illinois wins, hey, they're going to be looking towards that 8-win, maybe even that 9-win type of season. You look at this for Michigan State, a win here would set up almost a probable path for a bowl game. And a bowl game in year one for Jonathan Smith would be a big step in the right direction, certainly for the Spartans program. I think this game comes down to turnovers. Turnovers. That's been the story for the Michigan State Spartans this season. Now, when I look at turnovers, how about the team and the quarterback that has been protecting the football? And that's been Luke Altmaier. Outside of that Oregon game, which Luke threw 2 interceptions in, Altmaier has thrown just 1 interception the whole season. This is an Illinois team that's not going to blow you away. They're not going to be ultra explosive, but they don't make a ton of mistakes. They're very sound. They're that typical Brett Bielema football team in that regard. You look to the other side, Aiden Childs has thrown a total of 11 interceptions this season. He has 4 games with 2 or more INTs. And look back early in the season. Illinois was doing a really good job of taking the football away and forcing turnovers for some of these teams. But here's the thing. Before that Indiana game, right, that we just saw for Michigan State, Childs threw 1 interception in his last 3 games. So he was starting to maybe turn the corner. He was starting to clean it up a little bit. If you can get a clean game from Aiden Childs, I think that they've got the weapons on this team to create some plays down the field against Illinois and possibly walk out with a victory that way. But here's the deal. I trust Illinois right now to play a cleaner game, to play a more fundamentally sound football game, and I think that's the way this one goes. I've got the orange and blue of the Illini 24. I've got Sparty 17. That is a win and a cover for Illinois, and this one goes under the game total. I think that this Penn State-Purdue game is going to be just a little bit different when these two teams met up last. That season opener a couple of years back, that was back and forth, that Purdue nearly found a way to win in that night atmosphere in the season opener. But both of these teams look very different from a couple of years back, certainly. This thing is going off the rails for Ryan Walters at Purdue right now. He is on track for a 1-11 season in West Lafayette, Indiana. This team has certainly not progressed, right, in year 2 under Ryan Walters. They have certainly regressed. And you look at the Nittany Lions, they're coming off one of their best and most balanced offensive performances of the season where Drew Eller threw the ball, they ran the ball certainly extremely well. A lot of depth in that backfield for Penn State right now. I expect Penn State to just run it one more time. I expect them to run the football right at Purdue. And then when you look at the other side of the ball, the Boilermakers have given up 24 sacks this season. I think Penn State is going to absolutely live in the backfield, and that's been the story of Purdue football the last 2 years. They have not been able to protect Hudson Card very consistently. I think I think Penn State wins this game 42-10. That is a cover of the 28.5 point spread for Penn State, and this one hits the over with a combined total of 52 points. I did an in-depth preview on the channel and the podcast feeds of this game. So if you want more in-depth analysis on this game, go check that out on the channel and the podcast feeds. Of course, talking about the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the USC Trojans. The only constant is change, and these two teams have changed a whole lot in the last 2 weeks. Both of these teams have had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They're both coming off of a bye week. These are teams that look good in September, even into early October for a team like Nebraska that started off 5-0, but you've got Nebraska sitting there having lost their last 4 games at 5-4, and you've got USC sitting there at 4-5. It comes down to trust. Which set of changes do you trust will give a spark to a specific football team? Right now, I think I have, not by much maybe, but I have a little bit more faith, a little bit more trust that Jaden Maeva can maybe convince Lincoln Riley to go to the run game a little bit more. Because Jaden Maeva, he's a young quarterback. You don't want to put him into situations on 3rd and longs where you have to trust a young quarterback in his first game to throw the football down the field. I think that, at least I hope maybe is the right way to put this. I hope that Lincoln Riley has spent this time saying, hey, how do we lean into Woody Marks? Let's lean into Quentin Joyner. Let's lean in now to Jaden Maeva at quarterback. Let's lean into read stuff. Let's lean into design QB run and RPO type of schemes. And I think that's what's going to open up this offense with Jaden over there at quarterback. I think there's a lot more changes that need to take place with Dana Holgorsen now being the offensive coordinator at Nebraska. But I will say this, I think there's a world that exists that Nebraska's defensive line could absolutely feast on this USC offensive line that hasn't been very good, and a young quarterback making his first start. Now, when this graphic was made, it was -9 for USC. Some services had -9.5 in favor of the Trojans. This thing has come down to 7.5. I still got a Nebraska cover. I think USC finds a way to win at home, wearing those 1970s uniforms. 27-20, I've got the Trojans on top. This one goes under. Let's head out to the East Coast. These two teams are used to meeting at the end of the season, but they're going to meet a couple of weeks prior. You've got the Rutgers Scarlet Knights and the Maryland Terrapins, two teams that are right on the edge of glory as it comes to get into that bowl game right now. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights have been decimated by injuries, and injuries is one point that might determine which way this game goes. Of course, no Kyle Monungai last week for Rutgers, but they found a way to win anyway because Ethan Kaliakmanis played maybe the game of his career. He had revenge on his mind in that win against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I think there are opportunities for both Ethan Kaliakmanis of the Scarlet Knights and Billy Edwards of Maryland to throw the football. When you look at Ethan throwing the ball down the field, Maryland gives up the most passing yards per game in the Big Ten this season. And Rutgers isn't exactly a lockdown defense in the secondary. Based on what I've seen as an entire body of work, I think I trust Billy Edwards a little bit more to have a really good day at the office for Maryland. I haven't seen enough for Ethan to believe that he's going to put up back-to-back really good passing performances. Could it happen? Sure, it could happen. I think we're going to see some offense. I think we're going to see both quarterbacks move the football down the field. I've got Maryland winning 30-27. That is a cover of the 5-point spread for Rutgers. 5-point favorites the Maryland Terrapins are in this football game. But a combined 57 points in this game, I think this one could certainly go up and down the field. Let's end this on Big Ten Saturday night when the top-ranked Oregon Ducks go into Madison to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. The Ducks are 14.5-point favorites for a reason. They are the best team in college football. Look for the Oregon Ducks to just run the ball right at the Wisconsin Badgers. Look for them to be physical. Right? They've got a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award as the best offensive line in college football. And then you look at Wisconsin. They have had a tough time running the ball. They've played two pretty good fronts in Penn State and Iowa the last few weeks, and they've had a tough time stopping the run the last 2 weeks against Penn State, and they gave up over 300 yards rushing to the Iowa Hawkeyes in their last game before this bye. So I think Oregon can look at what they have up front on the defensive line. I think it's going to be tough for the Badgers to run the football, and I think it's going to be tough for the Badgers to stop what is now a really good 1-2 combination with Jordan James and Noah Whittington. He's been putting his head down. He's been putting his shoulder down. He's been running the ball with power as of late. I think Oregon is going to have a really good day running the football. I think Oregon's defense, right, they lock down in the secondary. I don't think the Badgers receivers can separate. We know the turnover troubles that Braden Locke has certainly had this season. Wisconsin, you need to find a way to stop Oregon on the early downs. You need to get off the field early in this game to keep your defense fresh throughout this contest. You need to force turnovers. You need to find a way to find shortcuts. But I think the Ducks easily cover. I've got Oregon 37 and Wisconsin 13. That is week number 12 in the Big Ten. Folks, we're getting down to it. Those are my picks. What are your picks? Leave them in the comments below. I will be out of town for the weekend, but I am going to be back on Monday, and I've got my nose to the grindstone. Have taken these last 2 weekends off a little bit, but it is now full go once we get back on Monday. Enjoy your college football Friday night and your college football Saturday. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.